What's going on, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX podcast, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Candice Coppola. Candice, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Jonathan. I'm really excited to be here.
So I first off have to say, you are a podcast professional yourself. I'm definitely following in your footsteps, and I'm really excited for my audience to check out your podcast. So everyone, we're going to leave links in the end where you can go connect up with Candice and see all the amazing things she does over on her podcast. But how did you get started? I want to kind of go back to the beginning because I think it's incredible what you do for the wedding and events industry. But I'd love to hear kind of a little bit of an origin story of what got you started in the industry. And I think it's so cool. I've noticed as I've gone through some of these interviews that a lot of wedding pros, they don't necessarily start in the industry. They start at different places, but then we do have some people that actually got their start in the industry and have been there a long time. So how did you kind of get your start in this industry?
Yeah, I'm actually the person who got started in the industry and had really little experience prior to starting my business. So I like to say I've been around since Moses, Jonathan. I've been around a long time since Moses parted the seas. I think he did that. And if he did that, I've been around that long. I've been around in the industry since 2007. So a long time. And I started my business on a whim, really. I was recovering from appendicitis. I had just had appendicitis, had my appendix removed. And at the time, I had dropped out of college and gotten a job at a medical practice. I needed to work. I needed to pay my bills. And to be honest, I just wasn't feeling going to school anymore. I was like 25, 26. And I needed to do something with my life. I had been in school a long time. And so I got a job and hated it so much. It's not what I envisioned for myself. And I was sitting on the couch with my appendicitis surgery, just recovering and taking a break from this horrible job. And I was watching TV and there was this television show called Whose Wedding Is It Anyway? This is bringing it way, 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 way back. And it was on TLC and it followed these wedding planners around and it sort of begged the question, whose wedding is it anyway? Is it the wedding planners or is it the couple getting married? And I was really enthralled. And it just ignited something in me. There was a spark. There was this moment where I thought I could do that. I could totally be a wedding planner. And I'm pretty sure every wedding planner who got their start saw wedding planning and said, I could do that. I could totally do that. That's definitely me. So I had my boyfriend at the time run out and buy me all these bridal magazines, which must have been very awkward for him to go to CVS and pick up Brides and Martha Stewart and whatever was around back then and bring them to me. And I went through them with a fine tooth comb. I was studying them like I was reading a textbook in school, just learning and absorbing. And I became obsessed with weddings. And it was in that sort of week of recovery that I decided I was going to open a wedding planning business. And I spent a lot of time figuring out what that meant. And I would come home from work every single day of the week and dig into my business, writing my business plan, creating a brand, building a website, reading more magazines, buying books off of Amazon when it was just a bookstore, reading books like The E-Myth and some other fun business books that were around back then, just pouring myself into it. And I had picked a date to leave my job. It was about 8 or 9 months after my surgery. And some things went down at work and it just kind of combusted. And I told my boss, who was not the nicest person, I quit. And he said, you're fired. And I said, great. So I got my pink slip and I walked out and I was able to launch my business the next day, collect a little unemployment while it got started. And before you knew it, I had grown a business in 2 years from that date into a multi-six-figure business. So it happened pretty rapidly for me. But that's how I got my start. It was sort of a fire in my belly. It could have been my surgery, but I also think it was a little inspiration. I had found something that really, for the very first time in my life, had made me excited about work, had made me excited about creating something for myself. And the rest is history. Yeah, that's how I got started.
I so love this. I love so many parts of your story. I feel like a lot of people, they do have this moment where they find something that they really love. And then someone who before maybe their friends or their family could have been like, oh my gosh, they're so lazy. they're not really driven towards anything.
That was me.
Well, and it's great because you click in and now you find that thing and you're the most driven and you're passionate. And then that really kickstarts your whole career. That is really, really inspirational. And I have a similar story and I'll maybe share it here in a little bit, but I think, do you feel like there was any of the getting fired side or maybe the environment at work that you didn't love, there was a propellant that really helped you, like now at this point, when you got fired or you quit, you were like, I'm done with this, that it was like, okay, now I got to go. This is serious. This is real. Was that scary?
It wasn't scary. It was really exciting. It was like
Okay.
a huge burden had been lifted off of my shoulders. And anybody listening who worked a job that they just did not like, that didn't speak to their soul, didn't give them purpose, and also to throw in a working environment, very toxic and difficult. It was like a huge burden had been lifted off my shoulders. And funny enough, that same feeling came again when I later sold that business in October of 2019. This business I built, I later sold it. And maybe we'll talk about that. But I had that same feeling of lightness, that burden being lifted. And there's just no greater feeling than freedom. There's just no greater feeling than freedom to be able to think on your own, do things on your own, line your own pockets, and the freedom and the inspiration of what could lie ahead in your future. There's just no greater feeling than that, especially when you're 26, right? Especially when you're a little bit younger and you've got your whole life ahead of you. It's infinite possibility. And so there was this excitement. I remember walking out and calling my boyfriend still at the time. He later became my fiance, my husband, and then he became my ex-husband. But
Full
I
circle.
remember in a nice, beautiful circle. But anyway, I remember calling him and just feeling so good. And he was very supportive of the whole thing, which made it so much more easier. But yeah, no, I was not scared. I was ready to go.
Do you think that people should kind of go through that similar process that you went through where you actually, you first had that inspiration, you were recovering, you were watching that show, got the magazines, instead of just going out and quitting right away, you stayed working, and then every little bit of time after, you were pouring and filling in that bucket. And then when it came time, you weren't going from zero, you had kind of protected yourself a little bit and then flowed into this new opportunity. Is that kind of a path that you'd recommend for others?
Yeah, I think it's a smart way to do things. Everybody's journey is different, right? But I can tell you that in my own circumstance, being able to sit with my idea and write a business plan and take my time and be a sponge to absorb things about business, how to plan a wedding. I bought Wedding Planning for Dummies, like just learning things and then digging into building a website and a brand and cultivating my services and coming up with my pricing. I was able to take my time to figure those things out. And remember, back in this time, there were no podcasts, there were no courses, there were no business coaches, there was nothing. I was very fortunate in the beginning of my career to have one of the women from Whose Wedding Is It Anyway, Miss Lynette, call me on the phone and give me some business advice. If you can imagine, I was literally like, oh my God, it's Lynette. It's just so funny. But I had a community though that I discovered in this process. And funny enough, Jonathan, I found that community on Twitter, which was the only social media app really at the time. I think Facebook was still sort of for like college age. It hadn't really gone public. So I was able to find a community of wedding pros on Twitter. And that community became my education, became my support, became a place where I could get advice and feedback. But going back to your original question, I think building a solid foundation for your business is important. Your business is like a house, and without a solid foundation, it's not going to weather storms. So taking that time to dig in and to uncover what you want and write a business plan and learn what you can while you are waiting for your exit strategy is smart if you can do that. But I've seen people who have just been like quitting their jobs and successful too. It just depends on the circumstance.
Totally. I want to ask you one more question about this before we move on, because I'm excited to hear about how you built Jubilee, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And the sale and then the podcast and all these different things and a huge point on community there. But I think there may be many people listening, maybe people who are new to the wedding and event space, or maybe who are finding this as part of their own discovery process, right?
Yeah.
And they're listening to this instead of reading a magazine or doing, something like that. And they might be scared. there might be some fear in there that like, I'm going outside of this corporate umbrella, even though I hate it, there's some security there. I know what's expected of me. There's this hierarchy. What would your advice be to those people who are coming up with those excuses and really they're kind of dragging their feet because there is this like untethering that's happening? Should they just kind of rip the Band-Aid off? Or, what kind of advice can you give someone who's just looking to kind of now finally do it and they need that push?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is subjective to everyone's situation, but what I will say is that if you find yourself in this place right now, I think the best thing you can do is recognize that all the experiences you've had up until this point in your life, in schooling, and in the careers that you've had, and the various jobs you've worked, whether you were a barista at Starbucks and now you're working a corporate job, have all prepared you for this moment. And that's something that I learned in starting a business and working with customers and being a salesperson for the very first time and hiring team members, all foreign things to me. And what I realized was I was given opportunities prior to opening my business to learn about these things. And I was drawing from my own experiences, and I opened myself up to learning along the way, being curious, being a good listener, asking questions so I could learn from other people in the industry and absorb their knowledge. So I would say if you are suffering from a bit of imposter syndrome, or if you're suffering from that resistance of like, I'm not ready yet, I don't know enough yet, which a lot of us get into that place. And I'm sure, Jonathan, for you, starting a podcast, it's a learning curve. And a lot of people have great ideas that they never act on because they think they're not ready, that they're not capable, that they need to buy one more course or do one more thing before they'll be ready. And I'm here to tell you that everything you've done thus far in your life is setting you up for the next great thing. Rely on those experiences. They are so valuable. You've learned so much along the way, and you'll be amazed at what an experience from your childhood or even from like your first job will teach you about owning a business or doing a certain project that's outside of your comfort zone.
That's been one of my favorite things about starting a business. I go back and I start realizing as I learn different lessons in my business that, oh, this actually is familiar. And maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but there was the lesson that I learned while working a front desk job at LA Fitness, in dealing with people or something like that cross applies. And I love that because I think for anyone who's younger listening, who's just kind of maybe in, just getting into college or post-college, really apply yourself even to the job that you don't feel like is that valuable or important, that barista Starbucks job, maybe that you're in your mind like, I'm not going to be a barista. But with that said, there's incredible lessons that you're learning later on down the line. They're going to be activated and you're going to be happy that, like you said, you took that time to ask those questions and kind of push in there. That's brilliant. So Candice, then walk me through. So you start this business in 2007, 8
Yep, that's right. Yeah, 2008, I launched it. I started the business idea in 2007, and it launched officially in 2008.
So I love that this was your timeline because I am fascinated with the way that our industry ebbs and flows with the economy. I think in a lot of ways, the wedding and events industry is recession proof. And certainly the pros who've been in this industry have learned that we aren't pandemic proof. But walk me through how your business changed. You're starting in 2008, where there's just been a huge financial crash. Really, 2009 is kind of the bottom and started, the upturn. Did you experience that? Did you even notice that?
No, this is a great question. I've even talked about this before. I didn't notice it, quite honestly. My business was kicking and screaming forward in 2009. I was really making huge progress, featured in magazines already, hiring team members. So just in 1 year, my business had exploded. And it could have been my young ignorance, but I didn't really understand the gravity of what was happening in the economy in the US, and how the market crashed and the bubble burst, and how, people suffered in their life savings and the Bernie Madoff stuff. Like, I didn't really understand all of that. All I knew is that people were having weddings. They were having very expensive weddings. in and around Connecticut, and they were hiring me to be their wedding planner and designer. So I was really oblivious to it, really oblivious to it, which is interesting. You think I would, you think I would have known, but I have to be honest, I was an art history major in college. So economics, and I was not a news watcher back then. So I had no idea.
I don't think a lot of people are, unless their head is already in political science or something like
Yeah.
that. They might understand that there are current events happening, like, oh, this is happening or that's happening. But understanding those deeper impacts, I don't think comes naturally. So I don't
Yeah.
think anyone will hold that against you. But did you see your business really accelerate as people were maybe figuring things out and the market was starting to come up again, and you kind of had, more and more success? Or like you said in the very beginning, you kind of applied those business principles and went right in?
Exactly right. I applied those business principles and went right in. Foundational business stuff that was relevant 20 years ago, relevant today, and will likely be very relevant tomorrow. I think one of the big keys to my success early on, aside from having a strategy, a plan, a brand that at the time was very beautiful. I look back at the old logo and I'm like, oh God, it looks so bad. But at the time, I made a splash when I launched my business. There were some old hats and people in the industry who were like, whoa, wait a minute. Who's this? And is she coming for our customers? I made a big splash. But aside from the strategy and having a really good brand that people connected with, I think the biggest, most critical thing in my success was the networking I did. I got into very early on doing all that research and connecting with people who were already in front of my ideal customers, the people that I wanted to attract. I was very strategic about who I reached out to. And this is back in the day when you could reach out to someone for a cup of coffee and they would actually show up and they had the time to do it. Nowadays, it just isn't the same. But the industry was smaller. And so I was able to create incredible connections. And those connections have led me to plan and design $1 million events. Those connections have led me to write 2 books with my 2 co-authors who I met in the first few months of my business. So those relationships are what helped my business. They were really the accelerant on my business and just set it on fire.
Candice, I was asking you specific questions about the time that you started and how you started, because I also feel like there are a lot of people who may look at starting their business and say, oh, like, I would love to start my business, but we're just in this pandemic and it's probably not a great time. Or, oh, the financial crash just happened, and so I probably shouldn't start it. I'm going to wait for a couple of years. Maybe I'll start in 2009, 2010, right? And
Mhm.
there's that approach again of like, let me wait till the timing is good instead of just jumping right in. So I love that. That's really inspirational. I'm hoping that anyone who listens to that kind of gets some courage from that. And I want to go back really quick before we get into kind of the business and the sale. I think it's beautiful what you said about buying another course, or, kind of that waiting process. I think people take courses or downloadable content or any of that different stuff kind of as this magic bullet, when instead, you don't get, if you're on a sports team, you don't get coaching, when you're in the game only. You get coaching through practice and through all the pre-steps. And so I think it's amazing that you actually have this coaching component, because now what you do is it's like, for a new pro coming into this business, hire a coach as soon as possible, because you need them in practice. You don't just need them for the big game. You need them in practice.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. And I would agree. I wish I had a business coach, but I luckily had a community, and community is so important. You don't want to do business alone. It's lonely. You're going to have a lot of questions no matter what stage you're at in your business right now. Doing business in community is so much better than doing business alone. And I do agree that, if you are finding yourself procrastinating on taking action and instead believing you need to take one more course or learn one more thing or listen to one more podcast and then you might be ready, Jonathan and I can both tell you that you're not going to be ready. When you get ready to get in the game and you actually take action, the action will create the clarity. So action creates clarity. The biggest lessons you've ever learned in your life have not been from books, they haven't been from videos, and they haven't been from courses. The greatest lessons you've ever learned in your life have been from your own lived experiences. So just recognize that the more you implement and take action and do in your business, the more you're going to learn. Invite those mistakes. Failure is always an option, and we should invite failure because it's the greatest teacher. And from failure comes success, right? And this is this quote, like, you can't have success without failure, or something to that effect. And I mean, but it's true. And we can be so scared to fail, to be perceived in the wrong way, to be judged, or to not be right or perfect. And I'm here to tell you that you'll never be perfect. You'll never be right. People will always judge you. So you've just got to go out there and do your thing. And the more action you take in doing your thing, the clearer it will become. You will learn more than you will learn in any course, any training, anything. Experience is the greatest teacher.
And to keep moving through that experience and not get stuck. Candice, that's powerful. I had to write that down because I think that like action creates clarity. I think so many people seek clarity before they act.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
And then they're stuck. They're like, I don't know. Like, I've done it. I've been there, like I've been, and then I'm wondering, what should I do? What should I do? And it's like, okay, do the thing you know to do next. Put your head down, go. You'll see the way start clearing for you.
Yes, it's a focus on the now and not the how. Focus on what you can do right now instead of how to do something. Focus on the now and not the how, and you will make incredible progress.
I love that. I love that. These are going to be little sound bites. We're going to put these together. We're going to blast these all over because it's so important. Okay. So you have this incredible business for 10, 11 years, right? Just about.
Yeah.
And then you sell it. So can you kind of walk me through? I mean, it's a long time in business to just, put into a little bit of a synopsis, but could you kind of explain to me your life cycle in your business and how you grew, and maybe some of the lessons that really stand out to you up until 2019 when you sold?
Yeah. So one critical moment in my business was back in 2012. I was really depressed. I was super burnt out. My marriage was failing, and then I went through a divorce. And so I was just in a place in my life where I felt really overwhelmed. And there were days where I couldn't get out of bed to go in my office, and the whole team's there working. I mean, it was just a mess. And I was burnt out. I was tired. And I would ask, like, who put me in charge of all this? My business had grown so rapidly. I was responsible for so much money, responsible for other people's livelihoods, responsible for overhead. I felt like I was drowning in responsibility. And I just said, like, who made me the boss of all of this? It was a really overwhelming time in my career, coupled with personal stuff, which we know we can't silo our business and our lives, right? We can't be perfect over here at work and then take off our jacket and go home and be a mess. Like, the mess comes into the work and the work comes into the mess. So there was some work I had to do in order to get myself in the right place. And it came after I lost a great friend in a tragic way, who passed away in a tragic way. And it just taught me one of life's greatest lessons up until that point in my life, having not really lost a lot of people in my life who were important to me. And that is, life is short. And, we're on this earth for a short period of time. And when somebody leaves us unexpectedly, all we have left are the memories that we share with that person. And it got me thinking about my work and the meaning behind what I was doing. Prior to that, I was just trying to be the best. I wanted to be in every magazine. I wanted all the clout and all the accolades, and I wanted the best customers. I wanted to win, 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 win. And I got in that cycle of me, which led to my burnout too, because that's not very fulfilling, always trying to win and not having a greater purpose of why you wake up and serve people. So in losing this friend of mine, I did a lot of thinking and reflecting, and it taught me many lessons, but one being that I help people celebrate moments that matter in their life. I have a gift of helping people celebrate something really special, a memory that will be remembered for a lifetime and passed on for generations. And it got me thinking differently about my work. It got me thinking differently about what I bring to the table. It got me thinking differently about the customers I wanted to work with who valued this as well. And it changed the game for my business. And I will say that it bought me more time in the industry. I felt reignited and re-excited about my work. It had a greater purpose. It was meaningful. And it didn't center around me. It centered around these families and these couples who were coming together and celebrating something wonderful. And I had a hand in creating that, a small role in creating that. So my business continued. I met my husband now, Jason, who's from Barbados. I decided to move here. So you can imagine growing this amazing business. What do you do when you fall in love with somebody in another country? What do you do? I had grown this great team though. And so we had made the decision that the business would continue to operate under the team's leadership in Connecticut. And I would continue the business in Barbados, managing both businesses, but only producing events in a destination way. So I produced the destination events, the team produced the tri-state events, and we continued to serve customers beautifully for many years, starting in 2014 up until I sold the business in 2019. But long story short, there was a moment, and I would say it's probably late 2017, maybe mid. It was about 2 years of leaning into the idea where I just got really tired again. And, my lifestyle had changed. I'm island living, like, pass me a cocktail, like, let's not work today kind of island life, right? So I went from this hustle and bustle and achievement and success to sort of being like, I don't feel like working today, My lifestyle had changed and I had gotten older. I'm 39 now. And so, things just changed. And during this whole time of building and growing my business, I was mentoring wedding pros one-on-one. They would hire me to coach them and I would mentor them to help them scale and grow their business. And I loved doing that so much. And I was trying to balance that sort of side hustle support with serving my wedding clients. And I reached a breaking point. I started to love one thing more than I loved the other. And so there was this journey of discovery of how can I follow my highest excitement of what I want to do, while also considering letting go of an identity that I have grown and built over the last 10 years. When you build a business and you write 2 books, and you're in Barnes and Noble and Target, and when you're in magazines and you're speaking on stages, and it's all you ever know, like it's your whole entire life. You can't just say goodbye to that very easily. It is who you are, and it's how people perceive you. So there was this whole journey of figuring out how to let that go because it didn't fill up my cup anymore. I didn't want to work so hard. I didn't want to give up my weekends. I didn't want to give up my evenings. And also, to be fair, I no longer connected with the customers. Their priorities, their values with these big weddings and all this money didn't align with my own money mindset or my own values. I eloped, I got married. It was me, my husband, his mom, and our 2 very dear friends. And we didn't even tell anybody. Those things just no longer mattered to me personally. So how could I be a good shepherd now of those things and really connect and understand their pain points and sympathize and empathize? I couldn't. So there was this resistance, and I started my podcast, The Power and Purpose, as a way to sort of test the idea of getting into the online marketing space and getting in the business coaching space with a broader audience. If this worked for me, and if I could touch the lives of more people in this way, then it gave me an opportunity to rethink the idea of owning this business and moving into the coaching world. And it did just that. As you know, podcasting is a powerful and also addictive sort of hobby and marketing thing. When you love it, and you love building it and growing it and speaking your knowledge and sharing the knowledges of others out in the world. So the podcast was very successful and I love doing it. And so I had to make a decision, and I wrestled with it for so long, talked about it with my husband for so long, and finally came to a place of peace that I could let go of this business, the only thing I've ever known since I was in my 20s, and enter into a new chapter in my life. So I approached one of my team members who was with me for 10 years. She started out as an intern, and I had flown her in for a really, really big, amazing, fantastic wedding that happened to be my very last wedding ever. And asked her, she was at my house for maybe 45 minutes. I had poured us a glass of wine and we were catching up. And I asked her if she wanted to buy the business. And she said, yep. So then we were frantically Googling, like, how do you buy a business? How do you sell a business? Just like a comedy show, right? And, it all came together very quickly after that. This was in May of 2019, and the business sold in October. So all that long story to say is it can be very hard to be in a business that no longer serves you. And what do you do with that? What do you do when you've built this castle and it's the wrong castle for you now? You don't want to live in it anymore. What do you do with that? It can be very difficult to navigate.
Candice, I so love hearing this story. And I think there's a lot of poetic elements to it because I think you've beautifully illustrated, but I think as the audience is listening to this, what I'm picking up is there's this continual metamorphosis that we're going through. At 25, 26, you have this vision of not doing the job that you're at, and you want to merge and do something else that you're passionate about. And you went through an identity change there from being kind of a lost 20 something to now really finding your purpose, in this new thing. You had this transition between maybe your work ethic and your hustle, right? Your focus on success, your drive. And now you build this incredible business and it happens again. You have to define what you're passionate about, who you care about serving. But there is one thing that I'm hearing that's consistent throughout this, and that is your passion for serving people. And I think for serving the most people you possibly can. And it sounds like you got to a tipping point in this mindset, in this discussion where you only were maybe able to reach 100 people. You wanted to reach 1,000 people. And so through your work with coaching, you're probably now able to reach many more couples because of how you pour into the lives of the pros that serve them. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm able to help more people celebrate moments that matter by helping the wedding pros who hire me build a profitable business with purpose, a business that can be around tomorrow because they're making money in it and it's purpose driven. But you're totally right. I mean, it is a metamorphosis and we all go through that. I just don't believe that we are meant to do one thing our whole lives. The majority of us are multi-hyphenate, we're multi-passionate. And you may find that your purpose, why you wake up to serve people, changes over time. And it's in that resistance of following that change where we can burn out and become tired and resentful and just kind of blow up our businesses too, by the way. Really blow them up. And I knew that I had to make a change before I blew up this business because I was not equipped to lead it anymore. I was not going to be able to lead it forward into a new decade. I was not capable of doing that anymore. I had all the skills and all the knowledge to, but I wasn't capable of it. So I had to make a choice. And it was actually pretty urgent because I don't know if the business would have survived with my leadership at the time. And today, I just don't know if it would have. I didn't have the desire to lead it anymore. So yes, I do think that we go through these changes in our life. And instead of resisting them, I hope somebody listening who's feeling this and understanding what I'm describing, maybe they're in it right now. I would encourage you just to lean into it, acknowledge it, and see what it means. You don't have to make a decision today, but acknowledge it and understand and use my story as a possibility for you. There could be on the other side of this something wonderful waiting for you, but you have to open yourself up to that possibility. It goes way back to the beginning of our conversation about freedom and just having that weight lifted off of your shoulders. It goes back to that feeling of feeling free to be able to think and do something that you love more. So if you're finding yourself in that place, just lean into it and try to discover what it means for you. And you can use my story and other stories you've heard here on the podcast as inspiration for what could be possible.
I absolutely love that. I think hearing this is such a breath of fresh air for me, because it kind of gives, like you're alluding to, it gives permission to change our minds, to go different directions. And it's not fatalistic. It's
No.
you didn't fail. And I think a lot of people think about it like that, like, oh, I don't love this anymore. And then again, there's this whole identity thing. What are the people going to think? And I've built this whole reputation as this person, and now I want to do this. And maybe there are people in your life even that are saying, oh, you can't do that. And you're like, but that's what I feel called to do. I think it's also interesting, and why it's so important what you do now with the coaching, to build systems and build a business. And to be honest, this is like a completely different topic that we could probably get into on a completely different podcast. But you almost have a responsibility to set your business up correctly, so that when that time, if and when that time does come, you're able to hand it off to someone else who's going to be so passionate about running this beautiful thing that you've built.
Yes. Yes, you're totally right. I mean, nobody wants to buy a hot mess.
No, absolutely. Or a hot mess that's built solely around one person's existence, and you had built a team. So could you just spend a couple of minutes explaining what you do with your coaching clients, and really kind of how you help them? Because I think that's the discussion that we're having here, of like, how, as a wedding pro, really a pro in any industry, but in this industry, when it's built around you as someone who's wildly creative, passionate about this industry, how do you build something that doesn't necessarily require you to just constantly be smothered by the weight of, like you said, the nights and the weekends and everything just relying on you, which can be quite, depressing after a while, I think, and heavy.
Yeah, for sure. I think most wedding pros have fears of hiring, and
Why
they
is that?
I think it's financial. And I also think it's a mindset thing. When you have been building and growing your business on your own, you often believe that nobody else can do something as good as you can do it, and that you'll have to end up doing it yourself anyway. So if it's just quicker for you to do, why don't you just do it? And this is also across a lot of industries, solo entrepreneurs who are building and growing a business rapidly, that actually does require team members to come in and offer support, always struggle with expanding and growing their team. I have a team now in my coaching business. I have a podcast manager, editor, a online business manager, a script writer. I mean, I've got a team. I can't do it alone. And I know that. But there's always this resistance when you're looking to hire someone. And I think there's a lot of mindset things that come into play. So one question you can ask yourself, instead of like, what is it going to cost me? Because that's always the big looming question of how much is this going to cost me? I want you to ask, what is it going to cost me not to have someone come in and take this off my plate? What is it going to cost me to not be able to free up my time to make more sales, or to provide a better experience, or to focus my attention on the things that quote unquote only I can do? What's it actually costing me? And I think you will find that it's costing you more money to do it yourself than to hire just even a virtual assistant to do it. But then there are other mindset things that sort of creep into place, like no one can do this better than me. And my question in reverse would be, how can I find someone to do this better than me? How can I find someone who's better at this than I am to help elevate this part of my business and really get it done? So if you want to build and grow a business like I did, and not everybody has to do that, that's your choice. But if you want to build a business that's sellable and scalable, you need to have a team. And you obviously need to be financially stable to support that team. And you need to be able to have your business growing in a direction where that team has work to do, but it's all possible. And only you will know your circumstances, but you have to get support. There are things you're doing right now in your business that you shouldn't be doing. Someone else can do for you, and they can actually do it better than you. Spoiler, there are people out there who are better than you at a lot of stuff. And one of my mottos was always like, let me find people who are smarter than me, more driven than me, who are better at this than I am. And it's funny, we would have an inquiry come in, and I wouldn't be available, or I would pass it over to one of the associate planners. And, they would know me because of my face in the business. And in the consultation, I might be sitting around, and I would sort of mention like, oh, you're so lucky that you have so-and-so. She's so much better at this than I am. And it's true because she's not dealing with all the stress of running a business. She just gets to show up for the customer. So anyway, I think it's very important to surround yourself with good people who can do jobs better than you to free yourself up to scale and grow your business and focus on only the things that you can do.
As an identity, another identity piece to this, I think that as early on in our careers, we identify as the hat wearer of every hat, right? And so when we come in, it's that identity shift of, instead of doing the job, we are identifying the pain points. We're becoming professionals and we're kind of pulling ourselves out of the day-to-day, but there definitely is that identity shift between, I need to respond to this email right now, to I need to find the right person to respond to that email.
Yes, it's a beautiful music you're singing here, Jonathan. I have to tell you, I could talk about this with you all day.
Well, you're totally right. So we might have to come back and do another podcast. But Candice, thank you so much for being here. Like, this has been inspiring to me. This has been encouraging to hear your process, to hear the incredible journey that you've had so far. And I have to say, you're telling me you're 39. I can't believe you're like a day over 29. So it must be the Barbados weather there. But, thank you so much really for coming on the show, for sharing with us some of your wisdom. When people are listening to this and they're just like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to Candice, I want to get in her ecosystem, where do they reach out and find you?
Oh, I would love to chat with your listeners. And the best place to find me is over on Instagram at candice.coppola. Send me a DM. Let me know that you're a listener of the Venue RX podcast. I love following people back. I am a cheerleader, a supporter. I love to dig in and see what you're doing and like all your photos and support you. So let me know you're a listener. I promise I will follow you back and I want to learn all about your business. You can also go to CandiceCoppola.com to learn more about me. I've got lots of freebies on my website, some trainings, and you can get a link to the podcast. So there's some free and paid for resources there to support you too.
I love that. And then when they want to check out your podcast, because I know I have checked out, you had a really good one on the 29th that just aired a little bit ago. And I really think more people need to spend passive time when they're in the car, when they're doing different things, investing into themselves, because listening to a podcast is free. And sometimes it will give you that push. It'll allow you to have that passive, education while you're driving or while you're doing something else. So where can they listen to you?
Oh, it's the Power and Purpose podcast. And I'm on a mission to help you lead your business with purpose. It's a mixture of interviews and solo shows, teaching. We provide action. We give you great content. We want it to be meaningful and worth your time. And you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, like just dial up your favorite podcast listener and you can pull it right up. And we'd love to have you as a listener.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Candice, for being here. And, I'm looking forward, we're going to have to put together a part 2 on this, but thank you again.
Thanks for having me.